Milton's Adventure, a Milton story, narrated by Ed Porncroft. Chapter 7, Big Battle at Ed's Burger. Author's note: the Ed in the title of this chapter is in no way affiliated with me, Ed Porncroft. This likeness of name is purely coincidental. Ed's Burger. One of the most successful intergalactic fast food restaurant chains in existence, selling upwards of 5 million burgers an hour to myriads of species from all across the universe. Folk from 4 galaxies over will make the pilgrimage countless light years through the cosmos in order to get a taste of Ed's mouth-watering, one-of-a-kind patties. So what makes Ed's Burger so special? To answer that, one must first understand the origin of the very first Ed's Burger restaurant to be opened. The legend goes that around 2 billion years ago, a cosmic titan by the name of Bohak Bull waged war on neighbouring titan Brihak Ba. The epic battle took place in the system of Gliese 876, 15 light years from Earth, in what the ancient Greeks would name the constellation of Aquarius. After thousands of years of brawling, Bohak Bull was felled and defeated, and Brihak Ba was left the victor. Portions of the downed Titan's decimated and decaying corpse began to break off and fragment, forming small asteroids and chunks that floated through the empty void of space for some millions of years. It was then that the Tanoids came. Small, reptilian humanoids from the deep recesses of the Vega system. They arrived on a spacefaring vessel bearing 3 generations of the lizard men and a hatchery containing over 10,000 egg specimens with one purpose: to locate and to colonize. They soon stumbled upon the largest of the dead Titan's fragments, so big it could be classified as a small planetoid in itself, having been shaped and moulded into a near-perfect sphere over millennia of being battered by other space ephemera. The Tanoids landed and probed, noticing the out-of-the-ordinary dark brown mass that orbited Gliese 876. They soon found the planetoid's surface was of a consumable carbon matter, preserved by the cold freeze of deep space. The substance was meat. For 3 generations, the Tanoids thrived off the little ball of delicious space flesh, mining the meat from the inside, boring further and further into the planetoid, unable to get enough of the prime victuals that the oversized meteorite offered. Their ceaseless consuming ended when one Tanoid spoke out. This Tanoid's name was Ed Quealy, a lowly gristle miner and father of 46. Ed Quealy's proposition was as follows: why continue to consume and deplete the planetoid of its resources for no reason other than hunger, when folk from all across the galaxy would come to get a taste themselves? The Tanoids of the Vega system were not often business-minded individuals, and leaned more so to mindless labour and consumption. Back on their giant yet overpopulated home planet of Vandalax Corvello 1, they had nearly starved themselves to extinction. It was only when certain intelligent individuals divulged the importance of space exploration that they began to evolve and conquer nearly all planets in their system. The Tanoid population sensed another great mind in Ed Quealy, and his proposition was met with unanimous approval. The construction of a gigantic super-restaurant and food production outlet spanning the 2 poles of the meat asteroid commenced immediately, with Ed masterminding the 6-year operation. The dining area was to span the entirety of the planetoid on a revolving belt, not unlike the enormous rings of space dust and debris surrounding their home planet, while the harvesting of the meat would take place on the interior, in an immense 80-mile cylindrical chamber from the northern pole of the meatball to the south. Word of the gigantic fast food distributor travelled all across the galaxy fast, and the restaurant, now dubbed Ed's Burger when translated into an approximation of Earth English, received its very first customers, a small family of Gromes from near Tau Ceti. The family of little woolly quadrupeds consumed 5 of the restaurant's first ever burgers in front of an audience of 2.5 billion, as every Tanoid on the planetoid gathered to watch. It is written that the Grome patriarch stood up, holding the burger aloft in his single trunk-like extremity, and threw his head back high, wailing in elation at the top of all 4 of his lungs. The burgers were an instant success. As the pool of customers expanded, so did the menu, augmenting to include thousands of side dishes, beverages, and consumable gases from all across the cosmos, catering to the tastes of billions of species. In time, the restaurant became a chain franchise, and more Ed's Burgers began to pop up on more of the titanic meat fragments that had drifted to neighbouring galaxies, including a most impressive branch housed in the perilous Abstraction Zone, a pocket of space festooned with wormholes and time rifts. While Ed Quealy passed away shortly before his restaurant opened one of the galaxy's first ever space fly-throughs, his legacy was survived by his firstborn son, Id Quealy, and in turn his grandson, Odd Quealy, and so on and so forth, until the present day, where Ed's Burger is now owned by the frail yet persistent Ag Quealy, an intrepid old tannoid who will stop at nothing to make sure that you enjoy your time at one of his 2,400 operating diners. It is in this time period, when the ball of meat hurtles past the now rather dim red dwarf that is Gliese 876 on another of its brief revolutions, that we join Milton Hamley Oliver, the boy hero of Earth who has just been assured that he is about to appease his insatiable appetite with one of the best burgers in existence. What the fuck is this place?
It's Ed's Burger, the biggest living burger. You did want to get a burger, right?
Responded Zab Elark, Milton's newly appointed bodyguard cum childminder, a mysterious man of few words. He and Milton had just spent the last half hour or so travelling rapidly through dimensions, and had little time to get to know each other through the constant palpitating vortex of colours. Yeah, but this is weird. Something doesn't feel right. Milton stepped out of the metal door before them, which opened out into what appeared to be a well-cleansed washroom. Space transmutation had a habit of doing this. Zab, this is a bloody toilet!
A toilet? At Ed's Burger, though. Look, you can see the logo of the little burger with a ring around it.
Milton gazed around the bathroom, too gripped in the throes of hunger to notice that none of the toilets, sinks, or hand-drying receptacles, if you could even call them that, were of human specification. Okay, fair enough. And this burger's going to be, like, the best in the world, yeah?
I mean, it's not just the best in the world.
Prior to their dimensional travel, Milton and Zab had engaged in a light debate on where the best burger could be found. Milton had vehemently appraised the quality of his father's own Insanity Burger, a family recipe consisting of a mustard-brushed chuck steak patty, topped with bacon, 3 slices of red Leicester cheese, and spicy mayo sauce, sandwiched between 2 seeded brioche buns. Zab had openly agreed this sounded pretty good, but recommended that Milton sample one of Ed's Burgers, to which Milton responded at first in anger and then confusion, having not ever heard of this beloved food item which Zab spoke so highly of. Now, standing in the stall of one of their toilets, Milton didn't care how good the burger was. He just wanted to put something in his mouth. Then by Krog, let's eat! Milton clapped his hands together and walked towards the door to the bathroom. Zab followed closely behind, tightly gripping his big black rifle. He wasn't exactly sure how Milton had avoided seeing or hearing the rotund pink quailoid throwing up aggressively in the adjacent stall. Right, I think I might go for something with, smoked cheese. It's like I've always said. Milton's sentence ran out halfway as he properly noticed his surroundings for the first time. The bathroom opened out dramatically into a vast curved diner, its design borrowing from an approximation of 40s Art Deco aesthetic, and the inside of a big metal ship from a sci-fi movie. The floor was comprised of classic gloss black and white checkered tiles, and a counter ran all the way around the inside of its curvature, disappearing off in both directions. Rounded windows all around afforded a view into what Milton quickly realized was the cold, dark gulf of deep space. Milton's eyes felt like they were about to melt and trickle down out of his sockets. What? Ed's Burger is in space? Zab chuckled.
Yeah, sorry, I probably should have mentioned that.
Milton gazed around wildly at the alien customers, all enjoying burgers in different colours, shapes and sizes. Some of the aliens were humanoid or looked a little bit like an animal, while some didn't make sense to Milton at all. A big ape-like thing with flesh the texture of a pineapple stood out particularly to Milton, as it peacefully tucked into its meal with its hands. I thought it was a diner in Texas or something. Milton turned to Zab, perplexed. What business do you have knowing about this? Zab itched the back of his neck.
Nah, well, a lot of people from Earth actually travel around space quite a lot. They're just not allowed to say it because of an agreement with NASA.
What the fuck? Oh, this is the type of thing that's in space. And aliens are real? Where are we?
Just near some red dwarf star. It's pretty cool.
Milton followed Zab to a waiting area plastered with electronic signs switching rapidly between thousands of languages. One of them in Earth English read, "Please wait to be seated." Milton looked around wildly at the other customers in waiting, a duo of tall grassy beings attached at the hip, a large semi-gelatinous creature that was all elbows and knees, and a convoy of floating cylinders. Who the fuck is Ed?
Oh, Ed's dead. He was an alien.
Shrugged Zab. Milton grasped at his head. He had been able to comprehend Rodworld, the city built on wooden stilts, and Ormia, the land of vampires, and even the Pucker Realm, the forest that went on forever, but a burger bar in deep space? This was too much for him to handle. Zab briefly summarized the nature of the orbiting restaurant as an alien waiter approached, a meek reptilian creature comprised of shimmering green and blue scales. It wore a bluish uniform displaying the colour scheme of the rest of the restaurant, and emblazoned with the little Planet Burger emblem. The lizard thing tipped its little cap and adjusted a small microphone around its jagged neck, which apparently translated its own speech into thousands of different languages. Identifying Milton and Zab as humans from planet Earth, the reptile server addressed them in a voice akin to a text-to-speech program.
"Hello dear customers, I hope your travels have been well. Welcome to Ed's Burger, the biggest living burger. I will be your server. My title is Rorentus. Please follow me now to your arranged seating area configured for third-dimensional dual bipedal anthropoids."
The scaled waiter indicated for the duo to follow behind as they walked by a series of gates that chimed with an increasingly higher tone as they were passed through. Milton whispered to Zab, "What the fuck is that thing?"
It's a Tanoid. They discovered the burger like 1,000,000 years ago. The staff is exclusively made up of them. I learned the hard way that they don't employ any other species.
Milton and Zab were ushered to a booth with an impressive view of total cosmic darkness, and handed 2 small blue pebbles. Milton watched as Zab casually shook the pebble, causing a bright holographic menu to burst forth, illuminating Milton's hungry face.
Place the stones in their respective clefts on the table when you find yourself ready to order your food, then I will be resummoned.
The bony reptile alien attempted a smile, which, because of the amount of thin sharp teeth lining its mouth, ended up looking more like a threatening grimace, and then bowed, leaving the 2 humans alone. "Zab, I don't know what any of this is," said Milton, reading off the ethereal floating menu. "Medium slab with a quarter portion of sodium compound? A twice distended wedge with a side of croutonium pickers? Deep fried grail worm? What is any of this stuff? Why can't I just have a burger?" Zab pointed at an item through the menu's transparent surface.
Get that. It's the closest thing to a Whopper.
While they waited for their meals to arrive, Milton continued to probe Zab for information. "Right, so, how do you know about this place? And how long have you been coming here?"
Well, I can't really remember exactly when. Maybe like 1952?
Milton's eyes widened. 1952? I thought you were a young man. Zab smiled.
Well, not really. But yeah, I used to fly my spaceship here and come and get a burger. It was like the hot new thing back then.
Spaceships? In 1952? You gotta be kidding me! Zab shook his head.
Man, there's a lot you don't know about.
Right, so this, agency you work for. Milton did some sarcastic speech marks with his fingers. What's it all about? Is it on another planet or something?
Nah, it's in Burbank, LA.
LA? Haha, oh, no way. No, I was just there.
Oh yeah? Pretty cool place.
Milton narrowed his eyes. Well, this agency is obviously some deep state organisation to have had space tech for so long. You weren't even fazed by my space transmutation. You just looked at your phone the whole time like it was a totally normal everyday thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been around for a while, so I guess I'm just used to it.
The conversation subsided and Milton returned to watching the colourful characters that moved around him, sitting down in all kinds of bizarre booths and seats, according to how many extremities they possessed. One patron sat nearby that was apparently from the 5th dimension stood out to Milton as not making any sense at all, warping all time and matter around it. A dripping cheeseburger floated in the centre of the incomprehensible mess. Milton began to pick at some gum stuck to the underside of the table, his stomach growling at him. "Hey, Zab, you won't tell my dad about us slacking off, will you?"
Nah.
responded Zab. Milton grinned. Cheers, Zab. You're a legend.
Thanks, bruh. Actually, that reminds me. I'll leave you a review on the app now.
Zab removed his phone from his pocket and tapped around on it a bit. Milton craned his neck to get a peek of the screen, but Zab jerked it away suddenly before he could make out anything other than a few words. What was that app called? Something Corp. Zab, did that just say death? Zab pocketed his phone again.
Nah, it's just the agency I work for.
Milton sat back and folded his arms. Sound like a company for assassins or something. A pang of hunger shot through his abdomen suddenly. Fuck! When's this food getting here? I feel like I haven't eaten in years. As if heeding his cries of ravenousness, Ro Rentis, the tannoid waiter, returned. A hovering tray that floated in front of him bore Milton and Zab's hot meals.
Here you go, sirs,
smiled the lizard, bestowing Zab with his meal first.
One Ed's Burger signature classic combination feast capsule with a half canister of carbonated Ogi water and a side of porous nourishment rings.
The meal was laid onto the table, consisting of various plastic containers that Zab began to pop open and unscrew. Come on, get on with it! Cried Milton, impatiently banging his fists on the table.
And for you, sir, the Ed's Deep Heat Saturated Meat column with a lactose supplement carton and 2 sides of decored Altoids.
Zab scanned his phone against a small red pebble that Ro Rentis produced from his front pocket as Milton eagerly accepted the meal, unwrapping his 2-foot-high burger from its aluminium casing with shaking hands. Ro Rentis nodded courteously and departed.
You're gonna wanna go easy on that, man,
said Zab, removing his black mask to take a modest bite of the turquoise-coloured sandwich.
The difference in gravity here is gonna make that a lot heavier inside you.
Milton couldn't hear Zab through the sound of his jaw locking repeatedly around the girth of the meat tower he gripped in his sweaty hands, and the rush of blood pumping around his head. As Milton chowed down, a small group of beings approached the table. They chattered to each other in an incomprehensible language for a few moments, watching the human aggressively consume his food, before addressing him shyly in a rough approximation of English.
Excuse us, sir, but we couldn't help notice that you wear the colours of our home planet.
Milton looked up at the little aliens. They seemed to be comprised of some aggregate-like substance, and had big beady yellow eyes.
Your spacesuit, sir. It bears our national colours.
Milton looked down at the purple and orange VR suit he still wore, now covered in excess meat juices from the behemoth burger. He swallowed the lump of flesh in his throat. What? Can't you see I'm trying to eat? One of the little rock people grinned widely.
We do not encounter many Earth humans who are even aware of our existence. You must understand that someone representing our little planet in such a way is unheard of. We are most impressed.
Milton wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Oh yeah? What planet's that?
Pluto, my good sir.
Milton looked at Zab. Plutonians? There have been aliens living on Pluto this whole time? Zab shrugged and Milton felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see the familiar smiling face of famed technology entrepreneur Elon Musk, holding a small burger that was slowly transitioning between pink and blue in his hand. Holy shit! Oh, Elon Musk! Gasped Milton. Haha. That's right, Milton. I have a little deal with the Plutonians, you see. They offer me cheap factory labor in return for me keeping their existence classified, much like my deal with NASA, and even Zab's agency. Elon nodded at Zab, who nodded back through a mouthful of battered matter. Elon placed his hand on one of the rock people's heads, causing it to giggle. It seems like my old friends have mistaken you as off-world representatives because of the colour of your outfit. He narrowed his already very narrow eyes. Actually, wait. That looks like a prototype virtual reality suit Microsoft commissioned me to make. Anyway, I hope this clears things up. Milton took another bite of his oozing burger. Well, actually, Elon, I had another question. How come there are so many humans in other dimensions and on other planets? I've been getting around a little bit, you see, and, well, I've only just really now been seeing all these aliens. Elon Musk smiled and took a seat next to Milton in the booth. Right, Milton, this is where it gets complicated. And I'm only telling you this because I know you're half Pakistanese. So basically, me and my scientists have been working on a theory that says humans are originally from some higher dimension or plane of sorts, and they've traveled down between dimensions and spread across the galaxy. Other life forms have been known to do the same. For example, the hard-working tannoids you see around you now. Elon indicated the lizard workers scurrying around, serving tables and cleaning surfaces. Milton belched. Okay, that clears things up, I guess. Elon leaned in. We've been looking specifically into, eggs. I can tell there's something there. Some hidden genome. Elon was cut short as one of the stout Plutonian rock people tugged at his sleeve. Oh, sorry, I've got to go. My girlfriend wants to get back to her meal. Ha ha! Milton and Zab watched as Elon walked off, surrounded by the group of little rock beings, his arm around one of them. What a strange man indeed, decreed Milton. Zab nodded, scrunching up his empty burger wrapping.
Yeah, he's always in here.
A tone sounded, echoing around the diner. It was followed by an automated announcement that was broadcasted separately to each table.
Attention Earth customers, the Ed's Belt-Busting Burger Challenge will begin in half an Earth hour.
Milton looked up from his meal, shocked by the sudden loud noise. What's that? Zab checked his phone.
Oh shit. I should have realised what day it is. Yeah, there's an eating competition on here today.
An eating competition? Milton suddenly regretted his big order. Oh man, I could have entered. Oh, now I'm too full. Zab shook his head.
Nah, you don't want to, man. It's gross. There's some aliens here who are really good. They win every time.
As if on cue, the main doors to the space restaurant slid apart dramatically. The restaurant fell silent. Milton span around in his seat to see a hulking mass of a man strut through the door. If you could even call it a man, for this man stood at an impressive 8 foot, with rippling biceps and earthquake-inducing pectorals to boot. His skin was a pallid grey, and his mouth was wide and twisted into a mean grin. The rest of his facial features were a mystery, as he wore a mask that Milton recognized to be that of a Mexican lucha wrestler. A very tight-fitting leotard clung desperately to his massive torso, which seemed to get larger as it towered upwards, and around his mile-wide shoulder-blades was hung a flowing golden cape. The gold-clad luchador stepped forwards enigmatically and struck a pose. He was flanked on either side by 2 shiny golden robots that each carried some kind of electrically charged blaster rifle. A suited tannoid with a moustache stepped forward, his speech being translated into thousands of languages and tuned uniquely to every species' ear through the pink megaphone he held.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the reigning champion of eating, El Frijoles Grandes.
The chunky wrestler was met with an uproarious applause. Aliens of all shapes and sizes stood up and jumped around, throwing food about the way in glee. Milton frowned. Who is this guy? Why is everyone... Milton bent over the table in sudden chronic pain, clutching his pounding head. Oh! Zab reached out.
Milton, are you alright?
There's something wrong. Oh, some crog in power.
Milton, what's happening? Are you okay?
Milton pounded at the table. Something was emitting huge waves of evil, and it was causing his head great anguish. He looked up at Zab, his gaze distant. He's a demon. Zab and Milton watched from their table as El Frijoles Grandes made his way through the crowd that now swarmed around him, dishing out high fives and autographs. The golden robots prevented anyone from getting too close, however. One unlucky fan resembling a tapeworm was sent rolling across the tiled floor by the unrelenting backhand of one of the robots, only to be squashed seconds later by another supporter resembling a giant fleshy chess piece. This guy's a demon for sure, one of Krog's most powerful. Milton rooted around in his pocket, pulling out the list. Yes, right here! Number 25, El Frijoles Grandes, Zab protested.
But he's the speed-eating, ass-beating, punch-dealing, hungry wrestler. He's like a celebrity around here.
He's a big dirty demon, Zab. They often come from the places you'd least expect. Look at him shaking hands with Elon like that. Who does he think he is? Milton clenched his fists.
Well, if you're so sure, you should probably let security know now, and then fight him or something,
suggested Zab. Milton turned quickly. Are you kidding me? You think these creepy dinosaur people will believe me? No, I'm going to have to think of another way. Milton rubbed his chin. Zab sipped at his space soda, the neon alien liquid briefly being visible through his neck.
Why not enter the belt-busting burger challenge? That's probably the only way you're going to get anywhere close to him.
Milton slumped back into the spongy seat, patting his midriff tenderly. I can't. I'm too full. Oh, look at me. I'm going into the food zone already.
Yeah, I know what you mean, man. That burger's made me feel 52.
Milton sat up suddenly. Wait! I have an idea! The bird can make stuff vanish from thin air. What if it does it to the contents of my stomach over and over again? Zab furrowed his brow, confused.
What?
Milton dug around in his backpack, pulling out the winged Puccinarium familiar. Right, bird, listen to me, okay? Milton paused for a second, considering the logistics of his plan. Right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, every time I snap my fingers, yeah, you're gonna magically cause the contents of my stomach to disappear. Yeah, you got it? Yeah? Okay. Milton took a deep breath and snapped his fingers. A dim burst of white light flashed out from Milton's abdomen, followed by a sensation that felt like Milton had taken a poo without actually letting anything out. Wow! I should be doing this all the time! He belched, exuding a white mist. Hey, I'm hungry again! Milton bent forward and grabbed a handful of Zab's nourishment rings and stuffed them into his mouth, then washed it down with a chug of some delicious space milk. As soon as he felt the food snake its way around his intestines, he snapped his fingers again, and sure enough, his stomach was void of all contents once more. Zab, this is great! I could eat forever! Zab adjusted his black mohawk.
That's great, but how are you going to join the contest? You have to apply like a light year in advance, and they're already in the semi-finals.
Milton stood up and donned his backpack. Listen, Zab, with my newfound endless stomach, I can do anything! Zab watched blankly as Milton marched up to the counter where the big luchador sat, his fans having been asked to depart while he enjoyed a welcoming beverage and a back rub from an assumedly female tannoid. Before he could get within 10 foot of the wrestler, the two golden robots stepped forth and blocked his path. Right, frijoles grandes! I'm challenging you to an eating duel! Milton grabbed a discus of tortilla chips intended to be served to the luchador from a passing waiter, and dashed them across the floor in a cascade of crispy crackling noise. The luchador's fat grey neck pivoted, his beady black eyes narrowed, and his thin grin turned slowly into a thin frown. He spoke in a low, deep voice, with a heavy Mexican accent.
¿Cómo estás?
The golden robots attempted a headlock, but Milton was too fast for them, ducking under their metallic arms and piling through them. Frijoles Grandes signalled for his robots to stand back as he alighted from his stool slowly, standing to tower over Milton.
You spilt my corn chips!
Milton blinked, admittedly very intimidated by the hulking hombre. That's right, and I'd do it all over again, given the chance. The luchador circled Milton, each hefty step shaking the orbiting diner belt. Crowds had now gathered and watched in silence. No one had ever dared to challenge El Frijoles Grandes and live to tell the tale. The mustached tannoid stuttered through his language-translating megaphone.
Sir Grandes, would you like us to remove him from the premises?
No, there is something about this bambino.
Frijoles inhaled through his nose deeply, as if smelling Milton.
He exudes some kind of aura.
Milton stood his ground. The name's Milton Hamley Oliver, and I'm here to put your eating abilities to shame. Frijoles Grandes laughed, a deep guffaw that revealed crooked, yellowed and stumpy teeth.
Then so be it. El Niño Milton will enter as my newest challenger.
The tannoid with the stash protested nervously, a bead of purple goo forming on his forehead.
This goes against contest regulations. A competitor cannot be entered this late in the game.
Frijoles turned on the lizard instantly, seizing him in one ham-sized fist.
Listen to me, Eskinko. The Chico will be entered without trouble. You hear me?
He dropped the tannoid to the floor, where it scurried away in fright on 4 legs. El Frijoles pointed a chunky finger at Milton.
The composition begins in 20 minutes. Be ready to become El Muertos. Ha 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 ha!
The vast wrestler turned, swooshing his golden cape around him, and exiting the restaurant through a door behind the counter, his 2 robots following after him. A number of tannoids swarmed Milton as El Frijoles departed the scene. Having composed himself, the suited tannoid addressed Milton through the high-tech bullhorn.
Challenger Milton, by popular demand, you have been selected to enter the Ed's Burger Belt Busting Challenge. Do you accept?
Milton folded his arms. You bet I do! The audience gasped and made other similar noises of astonishment that their vocal cords were capable of. A lowly tannoid with long horny prongs protruding from its skull approached bearing a holographic scroll. Milton was handed a long metal object that was apparently a pen, but looked more like a woman's vibrator.
Challenger Milton, you must sign this document stating that the Ed's Burger Corporation cannot be held accountable for any damage, accidental or otherwise, incurred upon yourself during the events of the contest.
Easy, said Milton, clicking a button on the end of the pen, which sprayed a jet of cream-like substance at the document, in a completely haphazard squiggle, bearing no resemblance to Milton's signature. There you go.
You will now be taken to the center of the planetoid, where the contest arena awaits.
Milton puffed up his chest. This wasn't how he'd expected his dining experience to go, but if it meant slaying a demon and getting in his father's good books, then he was happy that the events had transpired this way. Zab watched from his seat at the table as Milton was escorted by a parade of tannoids towards an elevator at the back of the diner. He turned and gave Zab a thumbs up before disappearing out of sight completely. Zab adjusted his visor. This was definitely proving to be one of his more interesting jobs. His phone buzzed on the table suddenly and he picked it up.
Hello?
Hey, alright, Zab Elark, it's Jamie here.
Came the familiar voice of TV chef Jamie Oliver.
Just calling to check up on Milton. Everything going alright?
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff, absolutely brilliant to hear. What are you up to?
Zab attempted to form a quick white lie in his head. If Jamie found out that he'd just lost Milton, then payment would be completely out of the question.
Just, killing one of those demons.
Oh yeah? Which one?
The big, rhino one?
Improvised Zab.
Oh, Unguarded Unyielding, okay. Did you find your way to the Lost City alright?
Yeah, nah, it was all good. We're just heading back now. In a boat?
Aha! Made friends with the river nymphs, did ya? Alright, I won't keep ya. I know what they're like if you catch my drift. Alright, just make sure Milton doesn't get out of your sight, yeah? He's prone to getting into all sorts of trouble. Alright, gotta go. Buddy Bear's throwing a bloody massive tantrum. Bye for now.
Jamie hung up and Zab breathed a sigh of relief. He had fooled Jamie, but now it was time to follow Milton and find out where that arena was. Zab picked up his rifle from the seat next to him and slung it over his shoulder, getting up and moving through the crowds of aliens that were queuing up for the big competition. Milton had been waiting in a small enclosed dressing room for what seemed like ages now. Apparently, the whole competition was going to be broadcasted to 10,000 different systems across the galaxy, and that meant that he had to wear makeup for some reason. He sat in front of a big mirror, practicing his eating technique on handfuls and handfuls and handfuls of complimentary tar-based nourishment discs. After a few minutes of practice, he found that the best method was to stuff the food into his mouth, then wait 30 seconds and subtly snap his fingers, removing the food from existence quickly and efficiently. A translated tannoid voice came from behind him.
Challenger Milton, this is your 5-minute call before you must enter the arena.
Milton hurriedly stuffed the bird into the concealed pocket of his orange and purple jumpsuit as 3 female tannoids scurried into the dressing room and began to adorn Milton's face with beige powders and a strange glossy substance that smelled like pistachios. Okay, coughed Milton, shooing them away. That's enough! I'm not a bloody drag queen! Milton was required to leave his backpack in the dressing room, which he was not too keen on as it held the chalice and his bayonet and all his other cool stuff, but he obliged on the condition that it was locked securely, and he was entrusted with the keycard. Milton followed a procession of tannoids through a network of twisting corridors that, by the smell of it, burrowed deep into the interior of the meat planetoid. In a matter of minutes, they arrived in front of a large metal door. A tannoid with a frilled neck addressed Milton.
Challenger Milton, once this door opens, you must walk out into the arena in the direction that the tape on the floor indicates. Then ascend the central stage and take a seat on the farthest chair.
Milton nodded. Yep, follow the tape. Chair on the end. Got it. With a hiss of hydraulics and a puff of dry ice, the door opened, and Milton stepped forward into the light.
Ladies and gentlemen, Groyles and Geens, presenting our newest challenger, human Milton Hamley Oliver of Earth.
Milton was blinded by the brightness and deafened by the noise coming from all around him, though he couldn't tell if he was being cheered or booed. His eyes adjusted to the sight of an enormous stadium set inside the cored-out heart of the planetoid. Walls of meat arched up around on all sides, complete with throbbing veins and nodes of white gristle. The sheer magnitude of the audience was astounding. Thousands of species of all shapes and sizes and colours sat in the seats that lined the stadium and crawled up the sides of the walls on all sides. Milton caught a glimpse of Elon Musk in a high booth in the side of the meat wall, surrounded by his excitable Plutonian companions. The tannoid with the moustache continued to introduce Milton through his megaphone, this time his words being blasted from immense hi-fi pylons positioned all around the stadium, onto which curved screens showing Milton's bewildered expressions were affixed.
Milton has been entered into the contest as a late-stage sponsor from Frijoles Grandes himself.
At the mere mention of the champion's name, the crowd went wild, presenting banners, flags, and 3D holograms of the masked luchador. As instructed, Milton followed the fluorescent tape that guided him up onto the podium in the center of the arena. Lines of tannoids parted as he passed. He made his way to the chair at the end, slightly lower than the other four and clearly implemented as an afterthought, as it completely threw off the symmetry of the arena.
Let's wish Milton all the best as we introduce our next contestant, who is incidentally also of Earth, known for his expertise in competitive consuming and impressive solo rap career. He weighs in at an astounding 400 pounds and is widely regarded as one of the Milky Way's fastest liquid drinkers. Give it up for human semifinalist, Eric Badlands Booker.
The crowd burst into appreciation as the floodlights came down on the portly form of African-American chugging aficionado Badlands Booker, who grinned and fired off 2 stumpy finger guns at the cameras to the theme of Gastronomer, a hip-hop hit from his 2011 album Big Man Mentality. Milton was in shock. How could another human have entered the competition, let alone someone so fat and jolly? Just how many people knew about this space restaurant after all? Badlands Booker ascended the stage and took his seat next to Milton, offering a courteous nod, which Milton met with an angry glower.
And now, coming all the way from the Calané cluster in the Rourke Nebula. He's a qualoid and he's ready to eat. It's semi-finalist Segregus Hope.
A creature not dissimilar to BBC's Mr. Blobby took to the stage, its pink folds jiggling and leaving behind a trail of pink juice. It seemed incredibly nervous, although it was impossible to tell through the thick layers of fat. The disgraceful pink mass took its position in the seat at the opposite end to Milton.
Our next competitor has taken part in every belt-busting challenge since its inception 400 years ago for reasons known only to himself. Please welcome to the stage, Lifeform X42, Engorge.
A floating sack resembling a giant stomach hovered up onto the podium, a tube protruding from its top flailing limply. It was met with a lukewarm response from about half the stadium, who were evidently pretty tired of seeing this regular attend the contest.
But now, ladies and gentlemen, the contestant you've all been waiting for. The reigning champion, unbeaten for the last 5 competitions. The luchador of luncheons from the planet Whack, El Frijoles Grandes.
The crowd exploded into the biggest cheer yet. Helium balloons bearing the luchador's thick face soared into the air, and an anthem of appraisal started up. Uno, dos, cuatro, tres. Frijoles Grandes is the best. Milton frowned as the pompous wrestler jogged up onto the stage and pranced around, pulling poses and throwing out oversized flowers to the crowds, which exploded into puffs of gold in the air. He minced his way to his golden seat in the center of the row, pausing only to sign the t-shirt of a tannoid hatchling with a missing leg. "This is totally over the top," professed Milton. Badlands turned to Milton. "Hey man, I'm just here for the food." The tannoid announcer soared overhead on a mobile platform.
The time has now come for the challenge to begin. Our 5 contestants are ready to take on the Ed's belt-busting challenge. Who will be crowned the champion consumer? All will be revealed upon 5 revolutions of the orb.
The spotlights shifted to a strange mechanism above the stage, consisting of a large metal sphere poised in front of another, even larger sphere. It was Milton's guess that the smaller orb would revolve around to signify the passing of time, like some kind of great big clock.
As is tradition, each challenger has 5 revolutions to consume as much of their Ed's Burger's patented Forever Burger as possible, a food item that will continually regenerate over and over again by way of meat realm sorcery. Challengers, hold forth your hands.
Milton looked down the row of seats as his opponents held their palms forth. He followed suit, and to his surprise, a burger materialized suddenly in his hands with a wet slap and a clamor of applause from the audience. Milton inspected the burger. It seemed to be pretty normal, more normal than anything else he'd seen at the restaurant so far. In fact, it looked just like an average 99p McDonald's Saver Menu cheeseburger.
Of course, the contestants are also permitted an unlimited supply of H2O to help get their burger down.
Milton jumped in surprise as a miniature rain cloud with a bendy straw stuck in the top appeared abruptly next to his armrest.
Now what do we say about the Forever Burger folks?
The announcer held his mic towards the crowd. "It's the meat that can't be beat," came the response. Milton swallowed. He hadn't been expecting this, but hey, an endless burger for an endless stomach. The moustached tannoid MC wrapped up the opening ceremony and prepared to start the orb's rotation.
Okay folks, the time has come to begin this year's belt-busting challenge. Good luck to all contestants, they'll need it for that 4 million galactic credit prize. Let's start the orb.
The speech was interrupted by El Frijoles Grandes, who stood from his seat abruptly.
Hold on! Before we start, I want to say a few words to our newest competitor.
A tannoid extended a long boom mic towards the chunky golden man, who turned to Milton, hand on heart, with a fake, twisted smile.
It is not often that I will say this to a rival, but with all my heart, I wish you the best of luck eating here today. As we say back where I'm from, espero que te ahogas con tu comida escorrida de puca.
The crowd was taken aback by Frijoles' kind words, reacting with yells of sympathy and compassion. Milton, however, was not convinced, and beckoned the mic over. "He said he wanted me to choke in Spanish!" Milton glared at the big demon, who had a wry grin spread across his fat cheeks. "I was born in Gibraltar, you can't fool me with that, you fat idiot!" The crowd booed and made similar noises of disapproval. El Frijoles frowned and wagged his dense finger.
Dios mío! Such language is not appropriate, and to accuse me of such slander.
The announcer swooped in.
He's right, we'll have to get a space bleep over that. As a penalty, the human Milton will have one whole burger deducted off his final score.
The punishment was met with cries of agreement from the audience as El Frijoles Grandes swaggered back to his chair.
Now folks, let's get straight back to it and set that orb off.
Several tannoids propelled by jetpack devices soared up towards the smaller orb and began to rub it, causing it to glow and oscillate as loud rhythmic music played.
Consumers, are you ready?
Milton watched as the 4 other contestants confirmed and prepared themselves. Badlands Booker donning his headphones and wringing out his hydration raincloud into a large 2-liter glass boot, and El Frijoles stretching his mouth around with his fingers. Milton felt his trouser pocket. The bird was securely concealed inside. All he had to do was successfully snap his fingers at the right time without attracting any attention. The announcer's voice boomed.
3, 2, 1, consume.
A foghorn-like noise sounded, and Milton brought the burger up to his mouth quickly, taking the first bite. He chewed and swallowed. The meat was good, and the bread was spongy and not too thick. This wouldn't be so bad after all. It was just a matter of getting it down his throat as fast as possible. He went in for a second bite and then, perhaps being a tad overzealous, a third. The meat and bread sloshed around in his mouth like clothes in a tumble-dryer. He could definitely keep this up. The burger was pretty much halfway done and he hadn't even broken a sweat. A 4th bite. Red sauce that could be ketchup oozed out of the side and trickled down his fingers. He didn't care. It wasn't important. The 5th bite. The sounds of the crowd and the constant narration of the tannoid presenter was completely drowned out by the all-encompassing sound of his jaw moving up and down, up and down. Milton crammed the rest of the burger into his mouth and swallowed hard, subtly snapping his greasy fingers. As expected, the mouthful vanished and he was revitalized. He afforded himself a glance at the other contestants and immediately wished he hadn't. Badlands Booker was halfway into his 3rd regeneration, as indicated by a large holographic number 2 rotating above his head, and the other contestants weren't far behind. Milton panicked, looking down to see that the burger had regenerated back to its original form. He took a rapid succession of small bites, taking it back down to half and swallowed. Some of the bread nearly became lodged in his gullet, but a quick sip from the water cloud negated the blockage quickly. Cold water whoshed down his throat, and it was time for the rest of the burger to follow. Milton pushed it down with his hand and swallowed, snapping his fingers for the 2nd time, and renewing his appetite. He looked up. His counter read 2, but now everyone else was on 4. He had to pick up the pace, especially if he was to overcome his penalty. The Forever Burger had already restored itself in his hands, and he went in for 2 aggressive chomps. By now, the taste was nullified. It was merely bland matter that was being forced down inside him. He chowed down into the other half, consuming the patty in record time. His number changed and another burger appeared in his hands. He was starting to get the hang of this now. "I could do this forever," Milton said out loud without realizing. The bun hit his tongue, and in seconds another burger was reduced to nothingness. Milton reminded himself not to get cocky and snapped his fingers. He was ready to go all over again. Milton continued this way for a complete rotation of the orb until his counter read 11 to the other contestants' 9. Everyone else was visibly lagging. Badlands moved his head to the beat of his music, yet sweat trickled down his big brown forehead. The quailoid Segregus Hode had clearly seen better days, and was excreting a puddle of pink goo that various tannoids were mopping up around him. Only Elfricoles seemed to be unfazed, steadily biting and chewing without even a sideways glance to any of his adversaries. Milton narrowed his eyes suspiciously through a big mouthful of burger. This was an underling of the devious Krag. There had to be some kind of cheating involved. And just where were those golden robots? Zab Elark watched from a distant row at the back of the audience. He had managed to sneak his way into the stadium without possession of a ticket, by donning a high-vis jacket and claiming that he was here to fix some stage lights, and that his large black rifle was a kind of electrician's tool. It had fooled the security, but certain members of the audience were becoming wary of the imposing weapon. A small furred creature prodded Zab and gesticulated towards the big gun, which Zab had toted over the balcony aimed at Fritoles Grandes. Zab recognized the being as a nablet from the moon of Pron, known for being highly overprotective of their young, which were nested in the being's own matted hair.
Oi, what do you want?
Zab shooed the little furry midget away, and returned to squinting through the scope of his rifle. He inspected the stage again, where Milton sat sweatily thrusting burger after burger into his mouth. Only Zab noticed the rapid clicking of his fingers every 20 seconds or so. He aimed the sights at Frijoles Grandes, who was ingesting his burgers calmly and methodically, and almost suspiciously slower than the other contestants, being a whole 5 burgers behind. Zab started to ponder this, but a loud and sudden explosion came from the stage. Milton looked up, startled by the sudden noise. A rain of guts and red viscera splattered down upon him as the giant stomach life-form X-42 Engorge burst, showering the stage and the front rows of the crowd in organic fleshy matter. A team of tannoid paramedics scurried onto the stage, gathering the vital components, but it seemed to already be too late.
Folks, it looks like Lifeform X-42 has eaten his final burger here at Ed's Burger. He definitely won't be participating in any more belt-busting challenges.
Milton was suitably horrified, a piece of pink membrane dangling from his burger, robbing him from any desire to continue. Badlands and the quailoid were likewise shocked, yet Elfricoles continued eating at his steady pace.
Let's hope that's it for this year's casualty, folks. Back to the contest.
Milton was forced to continue. He shook the membrane off and bit down hard. Zab continued to inspect the stage. There had to be some foul play here. People don't just go around exploding for no reason, even if they were a giant floating tummy. He moved his sights up to the balcony behind, where Elon Musk sat with his Plutonians. Nothing out of the ordinary here, just a bit of harmless canoodling. He looked across to the next balcony, where a giant maggot with a crown was being fanned, then to the neighbouring booth, which housed a group of nondescript wax-covered beings, and the next which was taken up entirely by a huge pale face. Zab turned back around. He knew these all to be regulars at Ed's Burger, definitely nothing unusual going on. Suddenly, a shimmering golden shape shot across his sights. He quickly focused onto the stage again to see the pink quailoid contestant slump in his seat, his burger disassembled on the floor in front. Something was picking the contestants off.
Folks, it looks like Segregus Hode is out for the count.
The tannoid paramedics checked the vital signs of the limp pink being, which was now seeping pink vomit at an alarming rate. One of them signaled the presenter with a flick of its thin tongue.
But don't worry, folks, he's just passed out. At a whopping 33 burgers, the current leading score. He goes out a hero. Let's see if anyone can beat him. There's 1.5 orb rotations left.
Various other front-row quailoid fans cheered as Segregus was unloaded onto a floating stretcher and rushed from the stage, a trail of pink bile flowing out behind him. Milton looked up at his number, 28. He was behind Badlands by 1, but in front of Elfricoles by 4. Milton scoffed. Elfricoles was slow as a snail. All he had to do was keep up this pace and not pass out. Zab carefully analysed the trajectory of the golden object, likely some kind of tranquilizer dart that had pierced Lifeform X-42 and knocked out the quailoid. It seemed to have come from up above.
The orbs!
Exclaimed Zab, aiming his sights up to the slow revolving spheres above the stage. The nablet tugged at his sleeve, but Zab elbowed it away. On top of the orbs would be the best place for a clear shot, while still remaining hidden, as they were lit from underneath, thus completely obscuring the top half. Anything could be hiding up there. Zab adjusted his Death Corp issue hyperlight goggles to night mode, and 2 robotic figures instantly became visible atop the large central orb, the same golden robots that had previously accompanied El Frijoles Grandes, caught in the act of loading up another sleeping dart. Zab had to act fast. He could attempt to shoot down the robots, but the bustling fans and bobbing balloons, flags and banners prevented a clear shot. He would have to employ use of one of the many gadgets in his arsenal, specifically his pair of Zinfon Maurice anti-gravity boots. Milton choked down his 29th burger, tears streaming down his cheeks. He had never eaten this much food before, not even at one of Jamie's legendary beans and cheese festivals. Even though no food was actually reaching his stomach, the strain on his throat was immense. He craned his neck around, and then used his hands to manually direct the chewed paste downward. Then a 5-second pause and a click of his fingers assured the meat was no more. He glanced to Badlands, who admittedly had a great rhythm going. It was going to be tricky to overtake him at this point. Back to the burger. Milton took a big bite, then a heavy thud came from his left. He turned to see Badlands, completely unconscious on the floor in front of his chair. His thick head collapsed into his 31st burger. Milton spotted a thin golden needle that would otherwise have gone unnoticed if it hadn't caught the light in the exact right way, sticking through the back of his classic Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest t-shirt.
Folks, it's happened again. The belt-busting challenge was too much for Earth-human Badlands Booker, weighing in at a total of 31 burgers. Give him a hand.
Badlands was rolled onto a hover stretcher, which nearly snapped under his girth, then whisked off stage.
This leaves 2 contestants, Milton Oliver versus the unbeaten champion, El Frijoles Grandes.
Milton gave a worried glance to the golden luchador, who looked up from the burger for the first time. A wide grin spread across his face aimed directly at Milton, who was beginning to put 2 and 2 together. He looked up around the stadium in an attempt to spot where the sleeping dart had been shot from, and spied a conspicuous figure scaling the walls of the hollowed burger arena. Zab was nearly completely upside down by this point. His anti-gravity boots had allowed him to walk up the arched gradient of the meat ceiling, and now the crowd and the entire arena lay a mile below him, all flashing lights and little specks of colour. Zab checked the golden assassins again. They were loading up the next dart. A cruel and calculated shot that would send a dart straight into Milton's left shoulder, rendering him unconscious and crowning El Frijoles as the winner of the belt-busting challenge once again. It was up to Zab to make sure this didn't happen. A quick press of a button on the side of his Zinfon Maurice boots reconfigured them into jet propulsion mode, and with a flash of white-hot flames, Zab soared from the ceiling and down towards the big orb like a bat swooping from its roost. He landed atop the big metal sphere with a clang, startling the golden robots and ruining their perfect shot.
Right, you golden goons, it's time to get shot down.
Before the robots could give any kind of reaction, a fiery inferno rushed from Zab's black gun, the white-hot heat melting them instantly upon contact. The robots bleeped and blooped as they were incinerated into a pool of molten gold that began to slowly run down the sides of the orb. Down below, Milton was beginning to suffer from early signs of extreme food sweats. He was panting between every bite, and his hair and bodysuit were completely drenched. El Frijoles was otherwise unfazed, continuing on almost nonchalantly. Milton looked over to the big wrestler, glassy-eyed, as a hot droplet of sweat ran down his forehead. He had eaten so much that his sweat was burning his head. Wait, no, something really was burning his head. Milton jumped up from his seat suddenly, wiping his forehead. "Fuck!" he cried as the liquid burnt his hand, causing him to fling his Forever Burger into the crowd. The tannoid presenter swooped down to stage level on his aerial platform.
What's this? Looks like the challenge is getting to be too much for human Milton.
Milton inspected his hand. "This is fucking molten gold!" He looked up as another fat droplet splattered to the stage a few feet away. "There's someone melting gold up there! Stop the contest!"
The human is correct. There is liquid metal pouring from above. Pause the orbs and inspect them,
ordered the mustached tannoid.
The contest will be halted until the source of the distraction is confirmed.
The crowd expressed its disappointment and confusion as a squadron of jetpack tannoids were dispatched and flew upward towards the orbs. Milton pointed an accusatory finger towards El Frijoles. "It's him! He's sabotaging the contest! Look!" Milton stooped to pick up the thin golden dart that had pierced Lifeform X-42 off the floor of the stage and held it up to the cameras, which were focused on him. "He's been firing sleeping darts into all the other contestants, and I was going to be next!" The crowd did not seem to appreciate this big claim, and Milton was met with a wave of boos. Another ball of hot gold dropped onto Milton's chair. I don't know what that is. Maybe one of his evil golden robot assassins needed to take a wee or something. Elfric Oles laughed from his big golden chair in the centre of the stage.
Ha 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 ha! Such accusations, little bambino. Such a heresy for someone who themselves has been cheating all along.
The crowd gasped and Milton suddenly looked very, very guilty. What? Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Elfric Oles Grande stood up, tossing aside his half-eaten burger and hulking over Milton.
Perhaps you thought the constant snapping of your fingers would go unnoticed, eh? You thought no one would know about the spell of infinite appetite you have put on your stomach!
Milton responded angrily. I would never! That's ridiculous! Elfric Oles grinned.
Ridiculous, eh? Then maybe you can explain the fact that your little stomach is completely empty.
The crowd oohed in awe as Elfric Oles removed a small telescope-like device from around his belt and aimed it at Milton's stomach, showing an X-ray that exposed his barren gut and intestines.
My own stomach for contrast!
Fricoles pointed the X-ray device at his own barrel-shaped midriff, which was stuffed to capacity with burger upon burger, mashed up and fully digested.
It seems that it is not I, the great Frijoles, who is the cheater, but Milton himself.
Milton tried to protest, but the crowd was already in uproar, flinging used food and detritus at the stage. The moustached tannoid made an attempt to suppress the racket, but Milton grabbed the bullhorn from his scaled hands and ran across the stage to climb up onto a pylon, out of reach from even the bulk of Frijoles and the tannoid security that had swarmed up onto the stage. Everyone listen up! Elfric Oles Grandes is not who he says he is. He's not a champion eater or a fun-loving arse-eating wrestler. He's a demon underling of the Great Krog! The crowd was silenced by the revelation, though very few of them actually understood its implications. Milton continued, having got their attention. And employees of Ed's Burger! He's cheating you out of the prize money year after year for some nefarious purpose! Although I'm not exactly sure what... Milton's announcement was cut short as one of the great metal orbs fell from the ceiling, to land with a huge crash in the centre of the stage, crushing Elfric Oles and a number of tannoids under its massive rotundity. A shockwave from the great impact downed the pylon that Milton was clinging desperately to, and sent the first few rows of the crowd flying backwards. An outbreak of shock and fear ensued, as thousands of aliens immediately began to make for the exits. The big ball, however, was not rolling around causing further damage, but was stuck fast into the stage. Milton was both surprised and relieved to see Zab unharmed atop the great balls, standing among some dead tannoid mechanics and a lot of hot gold, which had evidently messed with the orb's gravitational balance in some way, causing its plummet. Milton attempted to alert Zab with the bullhorn, but the tannoid presenter swooped by and grabbed it from his grasp on his aerial platform.
Arrest them. Arrest the humans at once. Ed's Burger will not stand for...
The moustached lizard was interrupted by the descent of a smaller second orb, which knocked him clean off the platform and onto the floor below, where he was promptly crushed into a fine purple paste. Unlike its larger friend, this smaller orb decided that it would roll into the crowd and did so, leaving behind a trail of havoc that got Milton reminiscing about his brief yet memorable time in Rodworld. Amongst the chaos, Milton scrambled up and made his way to Zab, who was fighting off swarms of angry tannoids. "Bird, stop blasting these lizard freaks!" The bird obliged its master and flew from his jumpsuit pocket, blasting the oncoming reptiles with quick beams of disintegrating white energy.
Milton, we need to split this joint,
cried Zab over the crackling of brittle sauropod skulls. I can't! I need to absorb Elfric Oles and gain his power! I'll be stuck under this big orb we're on! Bird, can you lift it up? Even though it didn't speak, the response from the bird was a resounding no. The giant ball was simply too heavy. Milton attempted to push the sphere with his own superhuman strength, but he seemed to currently possess the strength of a very average human instead. It's no use. I can't shift it.
Stop right there, humans,
came a translated tannoid voice from behind.
This is Regional Branch Manager Ku Banald placing you under arrest by order of the Intergalactic Constabulary Enforcement Regime.
Milton and Zab turned from their slaying to see a tall female tannoid with a ridged rainbow-coloured crest, dressed in a dark long robe. Surrounding her was a squadron of more tannoids wearing scaled armour and wielding long barbed staffs. Milton and Zab stood atop the big orb as the lizards advanced, their hands in the air. This is it, Zab! We're done for! A sudden low rumble came from beneath their feet as the foremost Tannoid guards produced handcuff-like devices. A sharp pain in Milton's forehead told him something big and bad was about to happen. Zab, get off the orb! The duo leapt from the metal sphere at exactly the right moment, before it soared up into the air to land with a weighty crash in the now mostly empty crowd stalls, bringing Ku Banold and her guards with it.
What was that?
Exclaimed Zab. They looked back to see the burly form of the undefeated El Frijoles Grandes crouched in the crater of the great orb, his leotard and cape ragged, torn and stained by the blood of a dozen crushed Tannoids. "It's Frijoles! His immense Krogian power allows him to survive being flattened!" cried Milton. What happened next happened in the span of about 10 seconds, leaving no time for Milton nor Zab to react. El Frijoles grinned widely at the two, and a loud explosion came from the far side of the arena. A freshly blasted hole in the side of the giant burger revealed a hovering golden limousine with green flame accents and 2 large front-mounted torpedo launchers, whose driver, another golden robot, signaled down for El Frijoles. The open hole to the cold of deep space instantly created a massive noiseless vacuum that sucked everyone and everything towards it, most notably El Frijoles, who flew up to the limousine and piled through the door in one swift, likely rehearsed maneuver. Milton felt himself go incredibly cold and stiff as he watched the golden limo pivot and speed off into the gulf of the cosmos. A passing burger patty slapped him on the cheek. All hope was lost. He had let El Frijoles escape, and now it was time to be sucked off into nothingness. What a horrible place to die. He closed his eyes and waited for the all-encompassing cold freeze. He waited and waited. But no cold came. Suddenly, gravity came back to him, and he felt himself fall downward to land on a pile of Tannoid corpses, one of which was the deceased regional branch manager Ku Banold. What? Milton opened his eyes and looked up at the big meaty hole, which had been plugged perfectly by the larger metal orb. Milton pumped his fist. Yes! The orb saves the day again! He got to his feet and looked around for Zab, who was nearby, spread-eagled among some downed copper cabling. Zab! We need to get my backpack from the dressing room and get us the heck out of here! Zab stood up with slight effort, having sustained an injury to his left ankle from the fall. He picked up his rifle and followed Milton across the ruined stadium. Mortally wounded, crushed, and decapitated alien corpses lay strewn around the arena, making navigation difficult. There were but a few stragglers limping toward the exits, but everyone else had otherwise fled the zone. Sirens overhead blared out loud, whining tones repeatedly.
The place is on lockdown. Backup forces are probably going to arrive soon,
predicted Zab, hobbling behind Milton on his crash course towards the big metal door that he had first entered the arena through. Milton signaled the exit. It's just over here!
Not so fast, violators!
Came another translated Tannoid voice from behind, this time much more crackly and frail-sounding.
This is Ag Queely, descendant of the venerable Ed Queely speaking. Turn yourselves in now or face dire consequences.
Milton and Zab turned again to see the legendary Ag Queely, owner of the entire Ed's Burger chain, flanked by more heavily armoured variants of the previous Tannoid guards. The geriatric reptile adjusted his ocular eyepiece and floated forward in a kind of hovering disability chair. It's like what Yoda rides in LEGO Star Wars 1, whispered Milton to Zab, who nodded in agreement.
One more step and you'll find yourselves wanted men in 7 different galaxies. Put down your weapons and come forward now and your punishment will be far less severe,
croaked the ancient Ag, his grey chin wattles flapping around like a windsock on a breezy highway. What's that then? Asked Milton.
As it stands, a mere 4 weeks in the Intergalactic Constabulary Detainment Facility on Pubar 9.
Yeah, fuck that, affirmed Milton, spinning on his heels and legging it through the big metal aperture. Zab followed behind as quick as he could manage, elbowing a big red button to shut off the door behind them. The hydraulics hissed and the door began to close slowly, affording Ag and his Tannoids ample time to scuttle and hover beneath. Now the chase was on. Milton followed the metal tunnels back the same way he had come in, taking sudden lefts and quick turns while Zab trailed behind, picking off encroaching Tannoids as often as he could. After a few minutes of hot pursuit, they arrived at the dressing room. Milton activated the door with a rapid swipe of his keycard and beckoned Zab within, whereupon they blocked the door off by filling a nondescript metal storage container as an obstruction. Numerous bangs and cries of anguish came from behind the door as Milton shuffled around, pulling his Attack on Titan backpack from its hiding place under an upturned alien waste paper basket. Ag's muffled voice came through.
Open up, by order of the ICER.
No chance, you decrepit old chameleon! I've got the chalice now! You can't stop me! Milton turned to Zab. How are we going to get out? Zab tapped a button on the side of his visor and scanned the room.
The air vent, up there.
Great. This is like a classic space movie, like on an Nostromo from Aliens. Wasting no time at all, Milton clambered up onto the dressing table and ripped the ventilation grill from the wall, clambering in. Zab followed, and the two heroes crawled their way along the narrow shaft. It's really hot in here, Zab.
Yeah, I think this network of air tunnels connects up to the kitchen. Follow the smell of grilled patties and we'll be out in no time.
After a few more minutes of wriggling through the vents, Milton and Zab came out into the kitchen. Milton kicked the cover off the wall and jumped down into the bright white, over-sanitized preparation room. It was big and empty, and there was a red alarm going off on the ceiling. Zab fired a quick shot at the flashing node to silence its racket. Right, I'm only going to grab exactly what I need, said Milton, running around the counters and placing various food items in his backpack. A handful of vibrating purple beans, a few sacks of a product bearing a logo depicting two sparring beetles, and the contents of a colander with its own electromagnetic field. Milton stopped last at the big fridge in the corner of the kitchen, where he unloaded several cartons of the tasty lactose supplement he had enjoyed with his meal and crammed them into his brimming sack.
You could do with a bit more room in that,
joked Zab. Milton jammed one last carton inside. Yeah, help me zip it up. Zab looked around anxiously.
Milton, you've got to get going. Frijoles is probably light years away by now.
Okay, cried Milton, slinging the full bag onto his back and running to the white double doors with a loud sloshing sound. The doors opened out into the area behind the counter in the curved dining belt that Milton was so familiar with. However, now the whole place was on lockdown, and a few tannoids remained activating shutters on windows as the last of the patrons were filed out, being offered refunds and discount tokens. Milton and Zab jogged to join the dwindling queue. Ro Rentis, their server from earlier, who was handing out complimentary mints, greeted them with a surprised expression, if you could even label the grotesque contortion of his crusted beak-like mouth as surprise. Milton slapped the lizard on its bump back. Hey man, ruddy shame about the big hole in your planetoid. We're just going to slip out through here if you don't mind. Before the meek tannoid could do so much as alert the security, Zab and Milton had pushed through the alien queue and through the chiming barriers and out onto the hangar floor, where a small number of spacecraft was still docked under a transparent protective dome that offered a striking view of space. Are we going to have to hotwire one of these? Asked Milton, excitedly gazing around the array of cool sci-fi spaceships. I want that one over there that looks like a giant rocket lolly. Zab shook his head.
Nah, no need. I've got my own.
Zab pulled a keychain from his pocket and pressed a little button. Milton blinked, and when he opened his eyes, a sleek silver retro 1950s-inspired spaceship had appeared in the middle of the hangar, right in front of them. What? You own this?
Yeah, man. How else would I fly around space and stuff? It's got a warp drive installed so I can teleport it to me wherever I am. The LED in my keychain lights up when the fuel's low as well.
Awesome, said Milton, touching the chrome finish tentatively.
Right, let's get out of here before the security catches up.
Zab jumped up into the cockpit of the silver space corvette, and Milton piled in after him, cramming his full bag down into the narrow footwell. The interior was not at all roomy, and probably worked better for one person, but it was pretty cool all the same. Milton looked out of the narrow window and spied Ag and his cronies come out through the front entrance. Quickly, Zab! Pedal to the metal! Let's get out of here! Zab tapped a lot of buttons and pulled down hard on a big lever, and the spaceship launched with a roar from its dual turbine engines, smashing through the layer of glass covering the hangar. Milton pressed his nose against the little window. Ha ha! We're off! We've left them behind in the dust! Zab turned a dial and pushed more buttons.
Right, I've activated the ship's radio sensory output. We should be able to make a jump into hyperlight mode and track that limo down.
A glowing object showed up on a little screen near Milton's crotch. What's that?
That's Frijoles Grandes.
How's he going so slow?
Probably that gold robot chauffeur. I bet it weighs a ton. Right, I'm gonna activate top speed mode. Put on some goggles.
Zab handed Milton a pair of goggles that looked like something an autistic kid would wear at the pool, and Milton pulled them over his face. The little ship convulsed and shuddered, and then blasted off into the stars at speeds Milton had not yet experienced.
Whoa! This is even crazier than space transmutation!
Stars and planets whizzed past like little twinkly candles on top of a big birthday cake.
There's the limo!
Zab pointed at a slow-moving shape on the horizon and recalibrated the course of the ship.
What's that below it?
Queried Milton, pointing out a much larger, even slower-moving shape below the space limo.
I'm not sure. We'll have to get a bit closer.
Zab yanked a knob on the control panel above and the ship raced forwards again, gliding across the big empty blackness to cruise up alongside the gold and green limo. Zab sounded a little horn as they approached the stupidly long flying car. The hulking form of El Frijoles was visible cooped up inside, behind the golden robot driver, who was doing his best to maintain top speeds. Frijoles did a double take as he noticed Milton and Zab pull up, slapping the robot's shoulder wildly and indicating to go faster. The limo jolted forward, a stream of golden particles pouring from its exhaust, just for show. Milton sat up in his seat, looking down at what the limo was heading towards, and saw a colossal freighter-like ship, miles long and bearing dozens of massive cargo containers. On the side was the all-too-familiar logo of the burger with the little ring around it.
It's the Ed's Burger cargo ship,
cried Zab.
We found one of its hidden trade routes.
What business does El Frijoles have with that?
Maybe he just wants to go where it's going,
replied Zab, pointing ahead to a huge swirling colourful vortex that the freighter was heading towards.
A gummy zone warp point.
A gummy zone what? What's one of those doing here?
It's like a fixed patch of space that behaves like your space transmutation powers. Other species have been using them to get around for ages now.
Then we're going to use it too,
said Milton, grabbing one of Zab's steering levers and pushing it downward so they flew towards the big cargo ship after El Frijoles.
But it could go anywhere,
protested Zab.
We don't have another option, Zab. Look behind us. I thought you of all people would have noticed that great big enemy ship following us.
Sure enough, the duo were being trailed by a huge dreadnought-like battleship, with the initials ICER plastered across the front. Sitting at the front of the space vessel's mighty bridge was Ag Queely and his tannoid lackeys.
It's the Intergalactic Constabulary,
affirmed Zab.
This is turning into a crazy space chase,
grinned Milton, pressing down a random button which sent the little silver ship into a series of spiralling barrel rolls down towards the freighter. The ICER dreadnought followed, matching the same speed with its powerful ion thruster jets. A compartment on the side of the big black destroyer ship slid away to reveal a surplus of space torpedo missiles, primed in the direction of Zab's starship. A transmission came through on the little screen in between Milton's legs. On it was a particularly grumpy Ag Queely.
Conspirators, cease movement at once or we will open fire.
Zab flipped a switch, which emptied the ship's septic tank. In moments, Ag had received the message loud, wet, and clear, and had made his final decision.
Right, then you leave us with no option.
Zab checked the ship's rear mirrors to see one of the missiles detach and launch off in hot pursuit.
Okay, Milton. When I say, you're going to press that button again and make the ship roll around and dodge those missiles, yeah?
Milton nodded.
Got it.
Zab touched at his goggles and counted in his head, watching the big impending warhead approach.
Right. Okay. Now!
Milton pushed the button, and the ship curved upwards, swooping upside down and around the missile, which flew past and towards the gold and green limo in front. Milton banged on the dashboard in excitement.
It's going to hit the limo!
As Milton predicted, the torpedo sailed right into El Frijoles' space limousine and exploded with a quick blast of shrapnel and molten gold. Milton fist-pumped the air.
Woo! Yeah! Direct hit!
But no damage,
added Zab, pointing out the chunky form of Frijoles Grandes jetting away towards the freighter with a comically small jetpack on his back.
He's surviving even out in space. What a piece of work. Let's go after him.
Zab nodded and engaged the thrusters, but nothing happened. He tried again, but to no avail. The little screen flashed up with Ag's face twisted into a crocodilian grin.
We have you in our tractor beams. You are hereby under arrest for crimes against the ICER.
Milton put his hands to his cheeks.
Oh no, that's no good!
Zab rummaged around in a compartment behind him, handing Milton what looked like a large metal Bakugan.
Here, take this. Follow Frijoles.
Milton looked up.
But Zab, what about you? Zab smiled, a reflective flash playing across his black goggles.
I'll be fine. It's not the first time I've escaped from prison.
Milton yanked his backpack from the footwell just in time for Zab to press the biggest, reddest button of all, which opened a hatch directly below Milton's seat, shooting him out into space. Milton felt himself go incredibly cold, incredibly quickly, for the second time that day. Then suddenly, the little Bakugan device Zab had gifted him began to unfold. Millions of little nanomites spread across Milton's exposed body, weaving him a cool 3D spacesuit. The nanobots covered his face, leaving a screen allowing him to see until Milton bore resemblance to some kind of Iron Man. Milton could have stuck around for a bit and played around with the cool tech, but he knew that time was of the essence, and that he had to act fast if he wanted to go unnoticed by the ICER ship. He jetted off, propelled by a nozzle coming out of his rear, turning back to see Zab's stoically calm face as his silver ship was slowly ingested into the hull of the terrible black dreadnought. Once its deeds were done, the ship turned slowly and engaged its hyperthrusters, disappearing instantly and leaving Milton alone to fare for himself. Milton soon found that performing swimming motions in the air greatly increased his speed and momentum, and continued to do so, until he touched down on top of the huge freighter, which was still chugging along towards the huge space rift on the celestial horizon. Milton found himself to be atop an immense container that was as big as a house. El Frijoles had been here too. A trail of congealed gold drops was stuck fast to the container, leading across to the next one along. Milton's best guess was that he was likely headed toward the cockpit. Milton rummaged around in his backpack and primed himself with his Puccanese dagger. So what if it was in space? He could be at the bottom of the ocean and still use this old thing for all he cared. Milton patrolled the tops of the big containers, moving steadily along the roofs of each one, crossing over the gaps with precise long jumps. After about 4 containers, Milton stopped. This container had a large suspicious hole blasted in the top, about the width of a burly male wrestler. Just wanting to get this over and done with, Milton jumped down inside. It was dark within the container, and a little light activated near his nanovisor. Milton glanced around the big rectangle. It was almost completely empty. Obviously, wherever this freighter was going, it was due for a stock-up.
Milton Oliver.
A deep Hispanic voice came from behind Milton, who jumped at the low tone and span around, wielding his blade. Frijoles! Show yourself! The thick wrestler stepped out from a dark corner of the container, his battered and bruised muscles illuminated by Milton's circle of torchlight.
It seems Kragian fate does not want us to be apart,
grinned the luchador, a few of his crooked teeth now missing. Milton flourished his blade. You're going to be apart by the time I'm finished with you!
I feared I may have gone too easy on you. You are not merely a bambino. I see now that you are the bearer of the Bloodstone Chalice. This is the powerful aura you exude.
Frijoles paced the back wall of the container. Milton nodded. That's right. I'm the son of Jamie Oliver, and with this blade, I'm going to kill the 50 of you demons that are left. Frijoles' expression turned mournful, then bitter.
Then it was you who killed Peanut Pete, my best friend and sparring partner.
Damn straight. And I'd probably kill him again and again, given the chance. Frijoles Grandes laughed. Then a sudden wave of red rage washed across him, and he charged forward at Milton in fury. Milton swerved the attack and swung his blade, slashing at the luchador's left bicep. Frijoles cried out in Spanish anguish as Milton calmly stepped forward. Just give up now, Big Beans. This doesn't have to be any harder than you're making it. Without warning, Frijoles crouched and curled up into a small ball. For a second, Milton thought the fat man was going to burst into tears, but then the burly wrestler released his energy and shot upwards, breaking another hole in the roof of the shipping container. Milton activated his rear jet and gave chase, hovering up through the gash in the metal. The freighter was nearly touching the void now, which was imminent and very hard not to be distracted by. If it weren't for his experience in space transmutation, Milton would have just sat down and admired all the pretty colours swirling around and around. Frijoles floated down to stand on the edge of the battered storage unit, his tattered golden cape billowing up around him.
No weapons. I request a real lucha fight.
Milton sheathed his dagger. Fine! Whatever that means. El Frijoles Grandes folded his arms.
The rules are simple. The winner is the man who pins the other man down for a count of 3. Or throws the other man over the edge.
Milton swallowed as he stared out into the unforgiving darkness of space on either side of the freighter as it piled along, the distant front of the ship now kissing the edge of the portal. "Then so be it," responded Milton, assuming a wrestling stance he had learned from playing WWE 2K15 on his Xbox 360. Frijoles snarled and charged forward again. Milton laid low to the ground and absorbed the attack, grabbing the luchador by his sweaty neck and gripping it tightly, keeping him in a headlocked position. He attempted to upturn the muscular hombre, but his manpower wasn't enough for the brute. Frijoles roared and picked Milton up, tossing him aside where he slid across to the very edge of the container. Milton's nano spacesuit deployed small claws that prevented him from slipping over the edge, and he was back on his feet in no time.
"You are cheating again!"
cried Frijoles.
"You wear a magic suit!"
"I need all the handicaps I can get! This isn't a fair fight! You're easily a super completo weight class!"
"And you are a teeny-weeny mosca, a little fly I can crush with my bare hands!"
El Frijoles launched forwards into a hurricane-inspired spin, hoping to catch Milton in between his flying thighs. Milton ducked the attempt and returned the favour with a super kick, sending Frijoles careening back along the freighter.
"You fight dirty!"
spat Frijoles, blood trickling from his thin mouth.
"Now, it is time for my super move!"
Frijoles squatted and readied himself for his prize move, the burrito beans and rice attack, which would see him spin vertically in the air and land a punishing elbow dive into Milton's chest. Milton calculated the mass and geometry of the move. Now could be time for a well-timed German suplex, or a stone-cold stunner, followed up with a grounded people's elbow. All very viable options available in his wrestler's arsenal. Milton ultimately had no time to decide, as Frijoles came down upon him with full force, knocking all of his wind out and sending him flying backwards and over the edge of the container. Milton flailed in the air, trying desperately to find something to grip onto, as he was sent rocketing backwards. He tried to activate his jet thrusters, but Frijoles' move was so powerful it had knocked the power out of his suit. His hand caught onto something, and he found himself hanging perilously off the rim of the container, with Frijoles looming above.
"You were no match for my ultimate move,"
he laughed, holding forward a stubby palm.
"Now take my hand, and I will lift you to safety and take the chalice. Then you will be tied up and left for whatever world lies beyond this portal."
Milton considered the many outcomes available to him. He didn't really fancy going through this big portal, and he'd rather rot to death in space than give up the chalice. Therefore, there was only one thing for it. "Never!" cried Milton, letting go of the container and being quickly ripped towards the depths of space. He watched as El Frijoles and the freighter slowly became minuscule in front of him. Now he was all alone again. If he was lucky, his spacesuit would last him a good couple of hours. What then? Milton found himself hating the idea of space. What a stupid waste of time. Milton closed his eyes and floated around angrily for a bit, before he felt something grab him from behind and pull him inside some kind of ship. Milton felt his space helmet retract, and he gladly took a few deep breaths of trusty old oxygen. A hand slapped him on his cheek, prompting him to open his eyes. What Milton saw when he did so was the smiling face of Elon Musk. "Milton, it's me, Elon. You've got to do this, Milton. Don't give up now." Milton immediately recalled Elon's camaraderie with El Frijoles back at Ed's Burger. "But you were on his side. I saw you shake his hand." Elon smiled. "Keep your enemies close, Milton. I've been trying to thwart that man for years now. He rigs the competition each year and uses all the prize money to build expensive casinos on his home planet." Milton sat up, looking around to see that he was inside what looked like a large angular car flying through space, still alongside the long freighter. Elon sat next to Milton, his many Plutonian companions all around him with little seatbelts on. One of them in the front seat was steering the car from a large booster seat. "Are we in a car?" Elon nodded. "Yes, Milton. This is one of my new Tesla space trucks. We're going to take you back to Frijoles, and then you're going to have another go at that fight. All I can say this time is you really have to concentrate and really believe you can beat him. Think of this as your second chance. Try number 2. The square car pulled up alongside the freighter, which was now halfway into the warp point, the front half of the freighter already having crossed over into the next dimension. Milton could see frijoles in front, storming along the roof of the container. Right, now get out there and kill that demon. I'm going to go and see what I can do about busting your friend out of jail. I'm sure we will meet again soon. Elon popped open the hatch-like door of the box car, and Milton jumped out, activating his helmet and waving to the little rocky Plutonians, who saluted Milton and his choice of garments a final time. "Thanks, Elon!" shouted Milton, as the car literally drove off into space, its wheels screeching on absolutely nothing. Right. Time to get this done. Milton sprinted forward, clearing the gap between the container he was on and the one he and Frijoles had battled on previously. Frijoles taunted Milton with freshly oiled biceps.
"Having fun with your amigo?"
Milton walked forward assuredly. "Yeah, actually. We talked about the best way to kill you." Frijoles spat at the ground.
"Musk is dead to me. El traidor!"
Milton cracked his knuckles. "Right, it's time for round 2. Did you hear the bell? Nope, 'cause I already rung it!" Milton ran forwards and leapt at El Frijoles, aiming a full-body double kick in the centre of his ribcage. Frijoles Grandes withstood the attack, pushing his chest out so that the impact was weakened considerably, and Milton bounced off, causing no damage.
"You should not have given me time to recover. No, you will never win.
El Frijoles grabbed Milton by his legs and picked him up, spinning him around and around in the air like a human lasso.
"This is for breaking my corn chips."
Milton was sent flying and hit the ground hard. Something in his nanotech suit malfunctioned, and the little nanomites fell away into nothingness. Milton was left exposed, clinging onto the top of the container for dear life, unable to breathe, unable to function.
"Not so powerful without your tech, are you, Bambino?"
Milton closed his eyes to block out the chiding words of the fat luchador. He didn't really need those nanobots. He didn't really need a magical spell to help him swallow food. He didn't really need gravity or oxygen. He was Milton. He didn't really need anything. The colours from the encroaching vortex shimmered and glimmered, bouncing off all the nearby stars and reflecting onto the surface of the long line of metal storage cubes. In a strange, otherworldly, alien way, it was almost beautiful. Against all odds, Milton stood up and turned, his body glowing with an orange radiance. Frijoles saw his sudden power and flinched, giving Milton just enough time to fly forwards and land the biggest punch in Frijoles' puffed-up chest, a punch which pierced through flesh and bone and out the other side. Milton pulled his hand back out as the body of Frijoles Grandes slumped to the floor. He looked at his bloodied hand, which was throbbing with orange power, and threw his head back, roaring at the top of his lungs, a sound which could be heard even in space. El Frijoles Grandes couldn't beat Milton. The cosmos couldn't beat Milton. Nothing could beat Milton. The container disappeared through the vortex with Milton on top of it. The dark emptiness of space was replaced instantly with every colour and combination of colours at once, expanding and multiplying infinitely. Milton felt the colours cover him entirely, and before too long he was lost in the swirling rainbow. The only thing that prevailed was the strong smell of cooked meat. Thank you for listening to this episode of Milton's Adventure, a Miltoncraft story. I, Ed Porncroft, have recently become married, and I'd like to take a moment to thank the listeners of this very audiobook for making it all possible. My wife, Petunia, was a long-time listener, and has finally decided to step out of her house and meet me at this lovely cafe I'm currently recording from. So, Petunia, I love you, and I can't wait to get married to you, which I've already done. It was great and the best day of my life. And to you listeners, thank you very much for listening, and have a nice evening and maybe a piece of pie. Goodbye.